We're Women Who Code Python, which is a track community of women who code. And Women Who Code is a global nonprofit that's dedicated to inspiring women to excel in technology careers. We have 4 main goals. We want to empower women with the skills needed for professional achievement. We want to educate companies to better promote, retain, and hire talented women. We want to build a global community, and it's really exciting that we have people from all over today, where networking and mentorship is valued, and we want to develop role models and support this generation of engineers. We do have a code of conduct for all of our in-person and online meetings. We're an inclusive community. We're dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or supports our community. And that's regardless of any of the classes you see here, up to and including preferred programming languages, although we are all about the Python on this track. We want to inspire women to excel in technology careers, and anyone who is there for this purpose is welcome. We don't tolerate harassment. We do have a code of conduct posted online, and you can see that or report any violations or concerns that you may have at womenwhocode.com/code of conduct. We have 6 of these track communities. They include front-end, blockchain, Python, mobile, cloud, and data science. And a shout out to our sponsors, because none of this would be possible without them. And those include McKinsey & Company, the Python Software Foundation, the Home Depot, and Atlassian. And today you are joining us for Mastering the Interview Python Style, which is a tech talk by Kelvina Burrell. And this is a little bit about Kelvina. And Kelvina, do you want to talk to your experience, or I can read this off, either way?
Sure, either way is fine.
Why don't you go ahead? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelvina Burrell. I currently work here at AT&T for our emergency management organization and our event management team. And some of the things that I do for our organization, a number of things: support some of our cloud servers, support a website, a number of our audits, everything in between as well. I also spend quite a bit of time in the community. I support a number of organizations, including Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code, SMASH, Mentoring Academy, and a whole host of other things in the community as well. But really, I'm all about technology, and especially empowering the next generation to become involved in technology, because I think it's so important for each of you and also the next generation to be a part of this, because we need all people included, and we need everyone's ideas on the table to help make our world a better place. So really, really important to me.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think with that, I need to stop the share and hand it over to you.
So today I want to speak with you all about mastering the interview Python style. And really, I want to hit on these 3 different areas. Ooh. Okay, is it allowing me to slide? Yeah, it needs to be in slideshow mode, sorry. Beginning. Whatever comes up, it's really, really slow. All right, so really today I want to hit on 3 different areas, key areas for you guys. So one is in regards to performance. How to perform well in the actual interview position. But also, I really want to highlight some things that maybe you should include in your portfolio or to have prepared prior to the interview, but also to give you some content to speak on. And then finally, I want to close out with a few practical tips relating to a number of areas that some of you are probably already included in, like data science, web development, and things like that. So hold on. I'm not so sure if it's changing screen. Can you guys see it in full mode?
I'm not seeing in full mode. I'm actually seeing it in the presentation program, but that's okay. I think it's big enough for me. Does anyone else want to? Yeah, so Sharupta is saying it's changing screens, but it's not in presentation mode.
Okay. Well, I will try to talk through this, even though I think that my computer perhaps is going a little bit slower to catch up because the slides aren't changing as they should. Maybe because I have a couple of applications going at once. But the first slide is really in regards to performance and the various interview methods. So there are a number of interview styles that you may encounter as you start to interview for your position. The first that I would like to kind of highlight is the panel discussion style. This one is a little bit intimidating sometimes because there are a number of people in the room and then there's just you. But no fear. Really, the number one thing you should remember is you are competent enough to be in the room. You were invited to be there because of your work product and you've done what it takes to be there. One thing to be mindful of is when you are in a panel style format, there are a number of people across the table from you, and then of course there's just you. But if one person asks you a question, you still want to direct your answer to everyone. You don't necessarily just want to target the one person who's asking you the question, because they may be asking the question, but you don't necessarily have to direct your response to just that person. You really want to spread your attention and focus around so that everyone feels the love. So really keep that in mind, and then also try to engage all participants in that room because you don't know who is the key influencer or decision maker for making that decision on hiring you. So really keep that in mind as you head into a panel interview. The other set that I really would like to highlight is the group interview. And this one does vary from the panel in that sometimes the group interview happens in segments, or it may happen throughout the day, as far as you'll have one interview with one person and then you'll go to maybe a different person. And this can happen in multiple ways, both in person, and I've seen this in person as far as you'll have to go to a different room and maybe talk to someone else. And a lot of times companies use this method to allow you to interview with multiple departments. Let's say you're interviewing for one position, but multiple departments need that same position. So they'll hire a number of people, but they're trying to vet which department you're a better fit for. So really the group interview is very beneficial from that standpoint, especially from an employer standpoint. But for you as the interviewee or the candidate, you would like to just try to connect with the person who's in the room as best you can and really be sharp, share your skill set, and just be as comfortable as possible there. But this one is a little bit, like I said, a little tricky in that you'll be going from one person you think you did really well, or maybe you didn't, but you also have opportunity or kind of a redemption with another person. Of course, I think at the end, maybe they'll discuss amongst each other which person will actually get you in their department, which is a good place to be, especially if you have multiple departments kind of going for you, which I've actually had before, and then either you or they will make that decision on which department you'll get with.
So,
the other interviews.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm getting reports from people that the slides are not moving forward. And
Okay.
I don't know if that's because we have now 54 participants on, so we might be experiencing a load issue. But yeah, I think I'm only seeing slide number 3 at this point, and not even your slide number 4.
Make sure
so
I
thought
hold on.
Yeah. And someone is also asking, I don't know if you can get your machine into presentation mode, but someone wanted the slides slightly bigger. If you could do it. If you can't, that's fine.
Okay. So hopefully it will pop up momentarily, but I will continue to speak through this slide because it's actually this slide number 4 that I'm on.
So I briefly saw it when you pressed from the beginning, but it's popped back. Yeah.
It didn't allow me to, it didn't pop up. So I'm like,
I have the same problem with when I use Google Slides. There's something, Zoom and Google and presentation software sometimes conflict. So We can see slide 4 though, so if you can't get it full screen, not the end of the world.
Okay. Well, you guys, I will make these slides available to you all after this. So if you don't get a chance to see part of the presentation, just know that I will send it out. And then of course, I will be available after the call. Like, you guys can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, whichever way you guys are comfortable. So just keep that in mind. So to continue on, I'll just continue on, and then I will check in just a moment just to see if it has caught up to me. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. The other thing I want to mention is the other style is virtual. So a lot of times companies don't necessarily want to spend the funds to fly you out, or maybe, let's say, the person that you're interviewing with, especially if you're interviewing for a global team, is maybe international. So the virtual option is really a great option to allow you to connect with people all over the world and to interview with the different people, and especially global corporations, very easily. And they will use a platform very similar to Zoom or Skype or WebEx, or there's a whole host of other applications that they could possibly use. One thing you would like to, I would suggest you do, is try to ensure that you have that application or software downloaded to your machine to just reduce some of the issues you may face. Of course, today we are seeing some of the issues you may face with the virtual environment, just in that things may not necessarily project as you would like. So really ensure that you have like a backup, and ensure that other people are able to see your material or be able to get a copy of anything that you're trying to share. You want to make sure you try to share that out ahead of time, but also ensure that the person is able to acquire that material afterwards if you can't send it out prior to. So keep that in mind. And one thing for the virtual interview I'd like to share as well is that sometimes when you're in a virtual setting, it's easy to think that, okay, well, the rest of my body may not be affected if I look good from the waist up. You really want to ensure that your entire body and you are professionally dressed the entire time. A lot of times this is true even if you have a phone interview, because a lot of times your voice will project how you feel. So you want to ensure that you're projecting a professional and positive demeanor the entire time. So just ensure that you are dressed head to toe, even for the virtual environment, and just be prepared to share whatever material you're going to share in that virtual environment as well. Download the technology. And last but not least, I listed this one last because I think it's most commonly used in interviews. Is the one-to-one style, where you're interviewing with just one person across from you. And it's really, really important that you try to find out as much information as you can about the overall interview process, as far as what style that the person will be using. Find out as much as you can about the company, try to do your research, and then also include like key facts along the way as well. You want to show that you have done your due diligence and researched the company prior to getting there, and have key questions prepared to ask the interviewer, whether it's around the working style. Ask them if working remotely if that's something important to you, if that's a possibility. Ask questions around who you may be working with, the style. This is also an opportunity for you to interview the company and interview to learn if this position will be a good fit for you as well. So it's not just the company interviewing you, you are also interviewing them. So keep some of these things on hand as well. Okay. I'm going to next slide if it will work with. So my next slide, which was delayed, the next slide is in regards to things like whiteboarding. So really this is the practice. I know that a lot of programmers, as you are programmers, you will at some point be faced with the opportunity to do some type of whiteboarding where you're going to have to write out your code. You won't necessarily have an IDE. I mean, some companies do provide laptops, but very rarely is that the case. And so given the opportunity to share your skill set and talent and demonstrate your capabilities, I would say, number one, practice. And the best way to practice this is to look up a few code challenges. Just Google code challenges and just do a couple just to see A, test your skill set, but B, also see if you're able to respond to that challenge in a handwritten format. And you want to be sure that you're prepared. And a good way to prepare yourself is not only to do some of those code challenges, but to go to sites like HackerRank, which a number of employers use that site to get test questions or candidate questions that they ask you during interviews. So I also recommend it to each of you to go to maybe a HackerRank or use a companion application like Leak Code to help you practice a few problems. And also, if you're struggling with something, maybe get support before you get to the interview, but also just sharpen your skill set. And one thing you want to be mindful of is through the whiteboarding process, you want to be sure to check your syntax. You want to ensure that you are writing things the right way. A lot of times we can get kind of handicapped using different IDEs because the IDE, as soon as we start to type, let's say, one of your functions, it'll autofill the rest of it. It will autofill some of the things that you may need to include as you start to whiteboard. So just keep that in mind as you start to do this process as well. Some of the key things you really want to ensure that you have and hit well are some of the basics. I know some of you, especially anyone who's maybe more advanced, you may think, oh, doing for loops or while loops are very easy, and they are, but you want to just ensure that you're writing it out properly and just really take the time out to do each one of these, even some of them are fundamentals, because these are the basics, and if you don't get through the basics, they'll question if you know how to do the rest of it. So just really be sure to hit the basics really hard when you're doing the whiteboarding test, and be sure to walk through the different data types and really explain your thought process. And this is something really key to whiteboarding as well. As you're starting to do this, this is a little bit different sometimes because we're not used to necessarily narrating our code. It's just like sometimes when you're doing math versus proofing. This process is a little bit different in that you're not normally proofing as far as sharing the evidence of why you chose that way or why you chose to use that function or why are you using this method versus another, things like that. So you really want to talk through and share with the interviewer how you're thinking, your thinking process, so that they can understand a little bit more about you and how you will approach that situation, how you can support their team or fit in with their team. So really work through that and practice talking through your code with someone you know, maybe a coding buddy, coworker, or just someone in your family, just talking through this process with someone so that you'll get used to doing it as well. So keep that in mind. Okay. All right. The next thing I want to really highlight is the portfolio, which I know the screen is extremely slow on this one. But the portfolio, this is really your body of work. You want to be able to share your skill set with the employer at some point. Ideally, you already have an account with, let's say, a GitHub, which GitHub is the #1 area that employers go to see some of your work, and they like to see that you've been consistently adding or making changes on here, right? So you want to get more green on there, working on things. But even if you don't, they do want to see at least some body of work there. And let's say you're new to Python or new to working on coding and whatnot. One thing that will be helpful for you is to, one, look for a open source project. Open source projects are really great for you to be able to collaborate with others, as well as get some more experience with the technology, as well as people in the community and in the industry. Another thing you want to be cognizant of is if you work for a company, let's say a government entity or a company like my own, where a lot of the work and projects that I work on are proprietary, and I'm not able to share on maybe, let's say, a public platform like GitHub. Well, one thing that for people like myself, or people who are new to the industry, can do is work on what I call a passion project, or just your hobby project. What you want to do there is kind of work on either one of the code challenges that I suggested earlier, maybe pick a few functionality that you want to display or share with others, and also be sure to just have some type of body of work there. Whether it's your website, you can create a website just full of things that you've worked on, or just demonstrating your strengths. So just think through that as a way of building out your portfolio and having a body of work to show. And one thing I have here on the next slide, which hopefully you guys will be able to see, is the Fizzbuzz challenge. So I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the Fizzbuzz challenge, but it's really, really easy and really, I think, fairly simple and straightforward. And that in the Fizzbuzz challenge, they ask you to write Fizz for if the first calculation goes through, you want to write something Fizz, right? The first module. And then the second thing, you want to use Fizz if the second calculation or if the second value comes through. So it could be, let's say, a number divisible by 5. For the first one, any number divisible by 5, you put Fizz, and any number divisible by 2, you put Biz. And then if both of them are true, then the expression Fizzbuzz will show up. So, and I have an example here, so you can see a couple different ways you can go about handling a challenge like this, because this is a fairly common challenge you would see as you start to interview with Python or really any programming language. So this one, and also the other one that is really pretty common, is the Fibonacci sequence, where you're able to just, you're going to use the Fibonacci sequence and really create that using, let's say, a whiteboarding challenge. So you really want to be able to just work through that and be able to complete that fairly quickly during your interview process. So I have an example you guys can see, but it is really, really slow.
Yeah, I was just about to jump in and say, we're still seeing slide 7, and I think I see slide 8 is your Fizzbuzz.
Yes.
We can be patient while the hamsters catch up.
Oh, no, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing I was going to share, because I will share these out with you guys, and you guys can play with this and really write out the code. And of course, if you get a chance, Google it, see a few examples online as well, and you'll see it kind of worked out in real time. The next slide is, if I can get to it. Challenges. Frustrating. My screen's frozen. Okay, it's moving. Oh boy. It's moving too fast. Okay. Sorry. All right, so it's moving way too fast for me. Okay.
Uh-oh, now we're on Q&A. Whoops.
No, it's not quite Q&A time. I did want to highlight some of the other areas, like this one. So I wanted to highlight the different areas that Python is relevant for. So some of you are part of some of the other tracks, like data science and web development, automation, and actually there are a couple things I wanted to highlight here. So Python is pretty useful for data science, and I know like this is a very up and coming part of the business. I kind of missed this one. Okay, so really it's an up and coming part of the business, and that Python is being used in data science because of its easy to use and easy for beginners to use, and also scale. It's a very, very popular language that focuses on different things you can use it for, like deep learning, if you're practicing that, or if you're doing any type of machine learning, where you're creating things using the different neural networks, as well as creating different algorithms and helping you to sort through data, clean data, and extract data from various websites. If you're doing any of that, Python is a very good and useful language for those things. So keep that in mind. This is actually the next slide I was supposed to go to. Was in regards to your story. I really wanted to highlight this as far as helping you to ensure that you stand out amongst the crowd, because there are a number of developers out there and programmers. You really want to be sure to share your story and be able to do so in a clear and concise manner. You want to be able to highlight maybe share why you got started using Python, or why did you get started in technology. You want to be able to share maybe a little bit about your origin, but also share about your strengths. What are you good at? What are your gifts? What are your talents? And how will you be able to use them to help pull and propel the team forward? So really being able to communicate why you should be the person chosen for the job, because a number of the tasks that are being done, any person could do, but how you approach it and what you bring to the table is different, and that's different for every person. And you really want to be sure that you highlight those unique differences so that they'll be sure to choose you when they're making their hiring decision. So really keep that in mind as you are going through the interview process. Just practice the story again with a friend or someone you trust, and be able to really be able to share the story succinctly. If they ask, hey, tell me about you, you can share it in that moment, or you can share it throughout maybe a different question to really just highlight your strengths. So be sure to hit that hard, and be sure to highlight maybe some of your accomplishments as well. So keep that in mind. And another thing to do to maybe stand out, just be sure that you're competent in your area, meaning you know your stuff. You know at least your area. And what I mean by that, sometimes, especially as women, sometimes we know some things and we're like, okay, I'm not the master at this, so I don't know if I can necessarily highlight that. I would share with each of you that even if you're not the master at that area, the fact that you've done it or have at least some experience in it, you want to highlight that to the person you're interviewing with. By no means do I mean to lie or to misrepresent yourself as being an expert when you're not. You really want to just highlight maybe some areas that you don't have if you don't have as much experience in it. Be sure to be able to tell someone that, hey, you're interested in that area, you're interested in growing and learning about that particular area, so that they will know that that's an area that maybe they could put you in, and that even if you're not the best in it today, maybe tomorrow you will be because of your passion. And so you really want to highlight those things within your interview as well. And also, I wanted to highlight that each of us are leaders. So we have an opportunity to be a leader and to present ourselves as leaders by the work that we do. So being able to produce high quality work, but also with your thought process and how you're able to bring the team together, how you go about solving problems, whether that's in a collaborative fashion or not, and how you approach a problem is also something key to this area. Be sure you know your material. Again, going back to understanding the different syntax, understanding the different data sets as well. Be sure that you know your stuff when you come in through the door. And it's not just necessarily knowing this one language, but also understanding how it interacts with other things. Making your project interoperable is very important. So all of those elements of who you are, you want to bring to the table and share that as well. And again, be sure to write these things by hand and check it using a computer. So you want to just write it by hand, and then double check with your computer to ensure that you have, in fact, completed the solution as listed. And then if you have any gaps or mistakes, that's fine. It's better for you to know when you do it individually than when you're in an interview. So keep that in mind. All right. Ooh. Sorry. Really stutter.
Don't apologize. I think we are all testing the world's networks at the moment. And there's you're giving us some really good tips as well. The handwrite a few problems, I know myself. I don't do that often enough, and I am one of these people who, without realizing it, is constantly checking my syntax either against the IDE or trying out sample problems in the REPL. And handwriting is really good for fixing things in your mind so that you're confident when you walk into that interview. Yeah, I think that's a great one.
Okay. Ever goes to the next slide. I promise I'll do more things. I don't know why my computer is like freezing up a little bit, but there are other tips and tricks because I do want to roll into the different subsets as well. I think that's really next.
Yeah, I'm really excited about hearing about your tips and tricks because I don't know about the rest of you all, but I become a perfectionist about these things, and then I overthink them, and then I get really wound up, and then I make things worse. So I'm always interested in tips for psyching myself up instead of psyching myself out.
For sure. Now it's minimized.
Yeah, I'm seeing a little black box in the middle of your shared screen, although I am still seeing the program, and I'm seeing slide 11 in the queue, but not on the main screen. So I don't know if if you've got a frozen state there.
Yeah, it's a warning box or whatever. I'm trying to close it. But yeah, it's freezing things, but I don't want to have to restart, like it's suggesting. So, yeah.
You can give it a sec, but the other thing is if you do need to leave and come back in, I think we can do that. So,
okay.
Oh, it went away. There we go. Now I'm seeing 11.
Okay. So here are some things to be mindful. So these are the key areas I wanted to highlight: data science and web development. So again, with data science, I have a quick tutorial here. So this is the tutorial here is really useful. I've used it in the past. I think it's really helpful, and I highlighted it as something that you guys should maybe perhaps use because they have a number of practical problems you guys can kind of work through and in real time see how well you're doing with your code. And if you want to just get more experience with understanding how to extract data or help to visualize data, you can use this platform and support you in data science. So any of our data science lovers or data science analysts, please use that platform. What I was there, but I know I highlighted it earlier. Hopefully we're on the web development one. So a few things about web development I think is really useful when using Python is that the code is fairly easy to understand. So people who are maybe coming from a different angle, let's say if you're a JavaScript lover or just from front end, whether you're front end or back end or just full stack, this language is useful for I think most things actually. I think definitely useful from the standpoint of the library is very expansive and it allows you to use the complex and variety of code. So you have a lot of things a lot of tools at your disposal, as well as it's object-oriented focus. It allows you to still remain in that structure. I get this question a lot sometimes from people who are fairly new to the industry, is whether to learn Python first or learn one of the other, learn maybe a more object-oriented language. I would say it depends on your preference for how you learn, right? So do you want to learn something where you'll have a quick win and get to be able to produce fairly quickly? Then you'll see maybe more, I think, a quicker call to action for when you implement things. You'll be able to implement a little quicker using Python. But I think understanding maybe the structure and understanding how to use some of those other object-oriented languages, whether it's Java, C, or any other language that you'd like to use in collaboration, I think those are helpful. And if you learn one over another, like let's say you learn one of those object-oriented languages, being able to use some of those same standards within Python, it will still help you. Or even if you learn Python first, learning Python will also help you understand some of the basics as far as understanding the fundamentals of coding, so that you'll be able to apply that even as you start to learn some of the object-oriented languages. So keep that in mind. The other thing I wanted to mention is the Django framework is very useful if you are using web development as your platform, is that an area you're working to develop in and you like to get better in. So definitely use Django, as it's very popular. A lot of people are using it when they're deploying their web development code.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out. I'm in a love-hate relationship with Django, to be really honest, because it's a very opinionated framework. But I do want to mention that Instagram still uses it. And if it's good enough for Instagram, well, then it's good enough for me. No, but seriously, it is a very popular framework. And so there's a lot of frameworks out there. Angular is another one of those frameworks. There's a ton. But if you're going to learn one, Django's a good multi-purpose one to learn.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And then also, it also has, there are a number of applications that you can use for testing, which is very, very important, because we all want to have resilient code, and we want code that works and ensure that it is bugless and we can debug fairly easily. So just keep that in mind, that there's inbuilt testing practices and tools that will help you along the way as well. So keep that in mind for our web developers. Automation. So I know automation is the other area that is also, I think, growing in importance. One of the things to keep in mind, so if you're using things like PyCharm or a different tool, then being able to do things like your unit tests or the PyTest, these are things that will be helpful, that they already have a well-built framework that you can maybe customize and maybe make it more specific to the project that you're working on. So that this is a great place to start if you're not able to create one on your own. So that's really cool about having a tool like that. But also, again, really highlighting being able to test your code. It's really important that you do that so that you don't have as many bugs in your code, and that you're able to produce a good product for your team, whoever that may be. So really keep that in mind. And one of the things that really to highlight is the command line workflows. So any of you who like to use the command line for different things, this is really, Python is very good to integrate with that. And of course, if you guys are new to coding or new to automation, it's fairly easy for any person to be a part of. So that means that there are people maybe on your team who are not as familiar with Python. It's fairly easy to get them up to speed on how to maybe do a few lines to help them automate things. Like for example, in my group, we have been able to build out various chat bots using not only just Python, but also Java to create some of our bots to help us automate some things within our business. So like when people have to reach out to my team and request knowledge or request an update on something that we have regarding our network, because a lot of the things we do is to share notifications on what's happening with our network. So there are places where we can post that data out there on one of our databases, and then the chatbot is able to go retrieve that information anytime somebody wants it without having to interrupt any person on our team. So that's one of the areas that is the chatbot was really helpful for us. But there are other things that you guys can do to help automate just your code or help to automate some of the processes that you're using within your business. So automation is another area that I think Python is helpful for. And then there are a number of packages that you can use to help ensure that, I guess, you have a better work product. I wanted to highlight a few of the areas that may be a challenge to maybe beginners or people who are working with Python. And here are, I guess, my top 10, but you all are free. I mean, I'm sure there are thousands out there that are challenging. I am going to highlight one in specific so we can review that in detail, but I just want to highlight a number of these. So using the class variables correctly. So really, one thing I would suggest each of you to do is really to write down maybe, let's say 2 or 3 of the class variables, and then walk through maybe some of the benefits and also some of the cons of using that particular variable, and then really walk through why you're using a specific one so that you can explain that to the interviewer as well. Just understand things like understanding the scope, as well as understanding the differences between the 2 versions of Python is really important, because there are some nuances that people don't really recognize. Not everything is backward compatible, and especially if you're working in an environment where you're using sometimes legacy link technology. I know even for our company, especially at AT&T, we have a number of legacy applications which you may be having to integrate with the old language, or let's say even as you attempt to use new languages with some of the older, or as you start to modernize the older languages. But knowing some of those differences that will allow being able to really speak to those differences so that you'll let them know that you understand how to help them if they're modernizing their platform or if they're working through something similar, as well as maybe writing out lists that you're able to iterate. Again, this one you'll see a lot with the interviews, because a lot of times they'll give you a list for you to iterate and say, hey, I want you to write it in a specific sequence, or hey, get this data set into a specific sequence. You want to be mindful of that as well. So.
That actually, point number 5 is an excellent one, because I know that a lot of interviewers have very strong opinions about data mutation and the mutability of data and being safe while you're mutating data. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really important, as you mentioned, because you want to protect the integrity of the data, because without it, we can't do all the work we need to do. So it's really important. Thanks for highlighting it. So this is one of the challenges is with list comprehension. So this is really important to bring up, because sometimes people get a little bit tripped up on the list comprehension, as far as, so they give you a list and then you want to do something with the list, right? So of course you'll be dealing with a lot of different data sets that you'll have to manipulate and change. So if you see in this example here, you're given a data set, right? So there's a list of numbers 1 through 10, and you want to be able to show that data set squared, right? That's your challenge. And if you share like in this example, using the number, time the number, and really kind of highlighting that process there. You can see this, you write a line very similar here, and it'll print out the squared values, which you'll see at the bottom of those are the square values of your list of numbers there. But this is I think a very straightforward example, but there are a number out there. But I really wanted to highlight list comprehensions because I think that this is the area that some people sometimes struggle with, and really understanding how to be able to go through an entire list and share how to change that data, be the entire subset the same way, things like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly chime in if I could. Christina was saying that she tries to always write out the loop that would produce the list the long way, so that she understands the logic of how to compress it into a comprehension. And I think that's a great strategy. I've been in interviews before where I've used a comprehension, and the person interviewing me, whether it was an interview technique or actual, was like, well, I'm confused by that syntax. Can you explain to me how that works? And what's tough is then saying, well, yes, I know how this works because this is actually a loop, and going back and writing the loop. And I've been tripped sometimes by that, that I've memorized the comprehension, but then forgotten that it actually is a loop underneath.
Oh, yeah. And thank you for that, Christina. I really appreciate you highlighting that. But yes, this is, I think, definitely beneficial, especially as you start to make more efficient code. I think that having the comprehensions will be helpful in keeping your code short, which is probably less likely to have bugs. But definitely writing things out the long way is good for those reasons you listed, just making sure you know it. And I think that's the number one thing, is really to know your stuff. I kind of wanted to share just some final tips for anyone going or heading into an interview. The number one thing is to relax. We all know that it can be nerve-wracking to go through an interview and go through the interview process. But really, the number one thing I want to share with you guys is to relax. Just ensure that you're prepared before you get there. Like I said, do a couple of coding challenges, check out some questions on LeetCode or HackerRank, and really ensure that you are able to get through the material there and be confident in what you have to share. So just know that you know your stuff. And the next thing is really be sure to reflect on your work history and the project you've worked on, and be able to share any accomplishments you've gained along the way. And so even if you don't have any true work experience, let's say using Python, again, highlighting those passion projects and walking through how you've overcome a challenge, whether you were trying to work on a new feature or, hey, you were trying to do something and it didn't work the first time, really talk through how you overcame that challenge and how you were able to get through and resolve that issue. So really highlighting some of your key accomplishments, no matter how big or small. Sometimes we think it has to be something very big or something monumental before we notice it to be an accomplishment. So just be mindful of that and write down maybe 2 or 3 so you can reference it throughout your interview. And then be sure to share your personal story and journey. And as I mentioned, really you are selling yourself. You have got to be uniquely yourself in everything that you do, but also in how you approach problems and sharing your strengths as well and what you bring to the table. You'll be able to accomplish a lot of things by just sharing who you are and showing your personality. So be sure to share your story and let your personality shine. And last but not least, be sure to kind of maybe try to ask questions, if you can, of people who work there or people who are on the team, and try to find out as much as you can, even in the initial interview part, where you can find out about what problems the company is facing, and then be able to bring ideas to the table on how you could tackle that issue within the first 90 days, so that you'll be more of an asset to the team, and they'll know that you can hit the ground running when you come through the door. So be mindful of that. All right. I want to say thank you to Women Who Code and Women Who Code Python. So thank you for that. And I'll pause for questions. I know I got like 2 minutes, but I still wanted to have questions, so I wanted to get to this point.
Yes, and we can, I know, Kelvina, your time is valuable and you have to get back to the valuable things that you are doing in your job, monitoring the network and keeping everything going. But we can go a little over if people want to, as time allows. So I don't want you to feel rushed, except of course we want to be respectful of your time. So just to put that out there. Christina did say in chat, I don't think she sent it to everyone, she just sent it to panelists. She mentioned the STAR format, which I don't know.
I know.
You know that. Okay, so you can speak to that.
Yes. So, Christina, I'm so thankful that you brought this up. So the STAR method is a method that's very common with interviewing. It's one of the behavioral interview techniques. And the STAR method is this. You talk about the situation, the task, the action, and the result of what you've completed. And what that means is when they ask you a question, they would like to know, what was the situation, i.e. what was going on at the time, what were you tasked to do, right? So what was it your manager asked you to do, or what was the problem at hand? You want to highlight that or structure that, set the stage. And then you want to talk about the task, what kind of things you needed to do or what was required to happen, whether that is you had to create a certain code, whether you had to reach out to the client to find out more information, or whether you had to connect with another coworker to get started on this project, to get permissions or whatever. You want to really just highlight what kind of work you had to do to get that accomplished. Then in the actions, you want to highlight the things you actually did to help accomplish that project. You want to highlight what you did to implement the solution that you had. How did you go about overcoming any challenges that, if you faced any, or if any challenges occurred throughout the process? You want to really highlight what you did to implement that solution. And then really highlight the results. What happened after you implemented the solution? Were you successful? And then because of your success, did it have any other results, right? Did it, because you did what you did, it allowed other teams to move forward? Did it allow the teams to get together? Were they able to overcome other roadblocks because of the work you did? What were the other things that were affected because of the work you did? So really just highlighting the result there. So STAR, look up the STAR method if you get a chance, and there are other examples as well.
So Miriam has a question if you have any tips for recent grads specifically. So someone who is maybe totally new to the workforce, or they're new in the sense that all they've done is maybe internships, but not, 9 to 5 for pay.
Oh, yeah. As I mentioned before, for anyone who's newer to this industry, do not feel any less inclined than anyone else, because the language, a lot of people are still learning the language, and a lot of people are fairly new as well. So don't feel alone, one, and just know that you are competent enough. One, as I mentioned before, you probably have done a lot of work. So one, be confident in the work that you've done so far, but two, make sure that you do some of those things I mentioned earlier. Go through and try to complete a couple of coding challenges online and just post them to your GitHub. As you start to get through a couple, post them to your GitHub, but also go through those sites I mentioned earlier, like HackerRank or use LeetCode. These sites, they just give you opportunity to work through some problems and be able to show how you respond to that problem, or how are you able to resolve that issue, whatever, whichever one you select. So you really want to highlight your work, your body of work is what I would say. So be sure that you have a really, really solid work product to show, even if it's a few projects you've worked on there or a project that you've had, your passion project or a hobby, a project you've worked on for your hobby. You really want to highlight those things. And then the last thing I did not mention throughout this presentation, but I really want to highlight, especially for newer graduates, use your network. I cannot stress enough that your network will help you get more opportunities than anything. The people that you know, the people you're connected to on LinkedIn, really be sure that you stay connected to your classmates so that you'll understand about new opportunities as they learn about them. But also be sure to, I guess, get support and help if you're ever challenged or you face an issue that you cannot accomplish on your own. Really reaching out to that community of people will really help you, even as you become a professional, because there will be things that you'll be like, wow, I never saw this before. This is my first time doing this. And so having that community of people will really be helpful, even if it's just going through, if you don't have anybody personally in your life, going through places like Stack Overflow, checking out solutions there and reaching out to that community, and or reaching out to people via Meetup. Or if you have communities like Women Who Code, this is a great place to come. If you have the issue, Women Who Code is a great place to come and share any issue that you're facing, any challenges you're facing. You have a whole community of ladies and people who will help you work through that issue and get a resolution. So really, A, have a solid work product, and B, never be afraid to use your network. So that's what I would share.
That is excellent advice. And that is one thing I want to put out there. Usually we wrap up with a couple slides that are a call to action for volunteering for Women Who Code or joining our Slack channel. And I can do that in a minute once we get any other questions taken care of. But yes, there are a lot of excellent organizations out there, not only Women Who Code, but organizations like the Python Software Foundation, and becoming a member there is excellent. One of the great things about becoming a member of the Python Software Foundation is if you become a voting member, then you get to vote on changes that are implemented in the language, which I think is really amazing. JavaScript is another one of those languages that allows you to do this. Unfortunately, Java is not one of those languages, and there are some other programming languages out there that are not community driven in the same way, but Python is very community driven. And so they actually put up what are called PEPs, Python, I can't remember what the E stands for. Python extension proposals. I can't remember what the E is, but in any case, what they are formal proposals to put features in the programming language, and members of the PSF can vote on them. And the ones that are highest voted get implemented in the language. And I think that's a really exciting thing. So the PSF is a place that you can go. And there's a lot of organizations out there. There's Women in Machine Learning and Data Science. And once you start asking for help, it's amazing who wants to step forward and help you. So yeah. So let's see, are there any other, do you have any other questions for Kelvina? Any comments? Oh, let me look at this widget, apologies. So Rachel wants to know, will interviewers want you to show off your skills in front of them? How do you go about doing that? And how do you stay calm doing that?
They definitely will want to see your skill set, and that's the purpose of whiteboarding. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, they will want to see your mindset as well as your skill set in real time. So they don't want to think, hey, my cousin did all my work, I'm just coming here for the job. No, they want to know that you know the work and you know how to do the job. So the number one thing I would say, as I mentioned earlier, one, relax. When you come there, know and be confident in your work product. Know that you have done the work necessary to make it into the room, to make it to the interview. So know and be confident in that. And the second thing is, as I mentioned, really practicing your skill set. using those coding challenges I mentioned. And I know I said that a lot, but I really believe in those, and they have helped me to become more effective in my job and being prepared for any interview circumstances. Is because as I work through problems, I'm like, wow, I didn't know this area, or wow, this is an area where I could definitely improve. So I say definitely practice using coding challenges. That will help you. And then also writing out those things by hand. As we mentioned earlier, sometimes when you write things by hand, and that's not common for us, especially us programmers or developers. We are not used to just writing things by hand, especially our code. So really writing those things by hand and taking time out to do that and practice your skill set, I think that will help you in feeling more comfortable, whether that is with an actual whiteboard at school, once we do get schools open, but writing that actually writing it out would be helpful. And if you don't have a whiteboard available, writing it with paper and pen, just writing out your code. And of course, like I said, really checking it using your IDE, because this is not familiar for us to just do that process. So I would say try whiteboarding and then do coding challenges and really try to practice that.
One resource that I found helpful in my journey, in addition to LeetCode, HackerRank, there's Code Wars, there's a lot of places where you can practice these coding challenges, and exactly what Kelvina said of like writing them out and being confident in the logic and being clear and practicing. But once you get that under your belt, there are places like exercism.io, and I'll paste that link in the chat. Exercism is a little bit different in the sense that they use the same coding challenges, but their emphasis is on sending your work to a human who gives you feedback on your code. And what is interesting about something like that is, for me especially, I can say it is very tough in an interview situation where you're trying to put your best foot forward to have an engineer critique, not criticize, but critique your work. And it can feel very, very threatening and fraught. And so it's important to practice getting feedback so that you aren't defensive. And it's a very tough thing to do. And so places like Exercism, but also places, as Kelvina said, in practicing with other people, help you to not only not freak out, I'm a big freaker outer, but to not be, it can be subtle, but if you feel defensive, your mannerisms, just like when you dress casually, your communication changes. When you get defensive, you can come off as being arrogant when all you're really intending to do is explain yourself. And so having situations where that feedback is, is comfortable and from someone you trust, so that you get comfortable with that is good. Sorry, too wordy.
No, you're fine. You did a great job.
So does anyone have any more questions? If not, I think I will wrap up, and I will go ahead and display our kind of final slide here so that you can get involved and join the conversation. Let me, uh-oh, I don't think I can take back hosting.
Well,
I made you host,
okay,
and now
sorry.
I make you host. Can you get in the widget and do that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I stopped sharing, and I'm trying to see your name and give you presenting rights back. Sorry, make host. I just made you the host, so hopefully
Okay,
you will
good.
get the rights back.
Let me pull this back down. Oh boy.
Did it come back?
Let's see, can you? Yes, now it did. Sorry.
No,
a little bit rough, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. But yes, so you can join the conversation. These are QR codes for our Instagram account, our Slack, although I did put the Slack invite into the chat channel for all of you. There is Women Who Code Python, which is womenwhocode.com/Python. and we also have a Twitter. And Kelvina, thank you so much for your time today and for your great tips. This was wonderful.